Welcome back to the Edgewater Avenue YouTube channel. My name is Katie and today we're going to be making the Marley one piece. For materials, you're going to need a yard of swimwear fabric, 5 yards of swimwear elastic, and your typical sewing supplies like scissors and a seam ripper. I'm also going to be using my overlock machine, but if you don't have one, you can use a zigzag stitch on a regular sewing machine. You will also need the pattern for the Marley one piece, which will be linked in the description. Before we jump into cutting into the fabric, I do want to mention that you have a couple options as for how you want to make this one piece. Since in the pattern, the top and bottom are separate pattern pieces, you can mix and match and make the top different from the bottom. So in this tutorial, my top is going to be white and the bottom is going to be black, but if you wanted to do a solid color, you could do that too. Another thing to note is that this pattern is asymmetric, so you're going to need to pay extra attention while you're cutting, and I'm going to get more into that. So after you've assembled your pattern, you're going to cut 2 in each pattern piece. So first I'm going to take my bottom pattern pieces for both the front and the back, and I'm going to cut 2 in each. Seam allowance is included in this pattern. So since this pattern is asymmetric, after I cut the first one with the pattern face up, I'm going to flip the pattern piece so it's face down on the fabric when I cut the second one. This way, I can ensure that right sides will match up together later on. With this black fabric, it doesn't really matter, but for the ribbed fabric that I'm going to use next, there's a very obvious right side, so don't make that mistake now. So once I've cut 2 in each bottom piece, I'm going to switch over to my top pieces and cut 2 in each as well. Again, first I'm going to cut one with the pattern facing up, and then I'm going to flip the pattern so it's face down and cut my other one. And you're going to do that for both the front top and the back top. Now we have all the pieces we need for this suit. And I'm going to separate them out into 4 groups. The top fronts with the bottom fronts, and the top backs with the bottom backs. First, working with my fronts, I'm going to lay each piece with the right side up. You'll notice that they are reflected, and this is why we flipped the pattern piece when we're cutting. If yours aren't reflected, then you may have messed up on cutting, so go back to the first step. I'm going to flip the top down so that the rectangular section is aligned with the rectangular section on the bottom. Make sure that you're laying it down so right sides are together. You're going to do the same with the other front. Use pins or clips to keep them in place, and then you're going to sew over just that rectangular portion. This will attach the top part to the bottom part, which ultimately will condense us down so we just have 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces. So once you've done this with the front, you're going to do the same thing with the back. We're going to match our front pieces and back pieces with right sides together. Once you get to this step, you'll be able to tell whether or not you cut your pieces correctly. If you did this correctly, you should be able to match right sides together. However, if you didn't, yours will be reflected when you try to match right sides. For the rest of this tutorial, we're going to use the method that I use for most of my other tutorials, which involves a clean finish. So match both your front pieces as well as your back pieces with the right sides together and pin along the leg holes, necklines, and the center curve. You're going to leave the gusset, the sides, and the straps all open. So switch on over to your machine to sew these seams. If you plan on using swimwear elastic, you're going to attach that right on top of your seams wherever you prefer to have it. And I'm going to show you later where I ended up putting the elastic.
Try to be myself, you do the same and we'll be alright.
As you can see, I attached elastic onto the leg holes, which I always recommend, and it's hard to see, but I also attached it along the neckline and armhole. The only place I didn't put it was on this inside curve, partly because the curve is already difficult enough to sew, but also I didn't really find it necessary for fit. But again, it's up to personal preference where you decide to put elastic or not put elastic. So the next thing we're going to do is attach the front piece to the back piece. To do this, we're going to flip the front piece to the right side and insert it inside of the back piece. One by one, line up the gussets, the sides, and the straps while the front piece is inside. Pin as you go to make sure the piece doesn't get twisted while it's inside. And once you've pinned, we're going to sew to attach the front piece to the back piece. When you're sewing, you're actually sewing through 4 layers of fabric, since the front piece is nested inside of the back. This is why at this step, you're able to attach the front and back piece. And you'll see later on how we're gonna get everything to the right side. Now usually I'd hop straight over to my serger to finish this, but I did see in the Facebook group that there were a lot of people who were doing basting stitches before they serge. And I really like this idea because it helps you kind of slow down the process of sewing and you have a little bit more control with the sewing machine. Plus, if you do mess up, it's easier to undo. So first, I'm going to use a straight stitch to sew the sides, the gusset, and the strap. Then once I'm done, I'm going to switch over to my serger and I'm going to sew right on top of that straight stitch. This will finish off the raw edges and complete the stitch. And since I'm serging on top of the straight stitch, it won't be visible when I flip the piece to the right side. Next, we need to take our suit all the way to the right side. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to seam rip my 1 to 2 inch hole. I like to go back over either side of the marked areas before I seam rip, that way the stitches don't run after I rip the original stitch. Once I've secured the surrounding seams, I'm going to use my seam ripper to rip this area open. Then I'm going to pull the entire contents of what's inside out, and that is how I'm bringing the suit all the way to the right side. Now you'll see that everything is attached and the suit is almost ready to go. The last thing you need to do is finish off that hole, either with an invisible stitch or just a top stitch. And here's how it turned out. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Make sure you grab the Marley one piece, available now at edgewateravenue.com, and it's also going to be linked in the description. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.